From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Good Friday morning. It's 5:30. Welcome to Montana This Morning. I'm Victoria Hill. Thanks for starting your day and the weekend with us. Miller joins us here on the set too with another look at the weather and what's ahead. Did we get much activity in Billings or did I sleep through it?
No, not much in Billings. Okay. Maybe a rumble of thunder or two. It was mainly north and the south and east of us yesterday. We did have some reports of like penny-sized hail in Sheridan County. Also, we have that possibility again today. Maybe not so much in Billings, but we're looking maybe to the north and east of Billings today. And more about that with the main forecast coming up. We're dealing with more smoke this morning. In fact, this is going to linger throughout the day today, so the air quality is not going to be very good. But it gets better tomorrow as we're going to be in the wake of a front, so something to look forward to there. 54 right now at the airport, humidity at 77%, winds out of the southwest at about 6 miles an hour. Some temperatures across the viewing area, 49 in Harlingen, down in Gardner at 48. We've got 53 in Huntley, 54 in Ingomar, Colstrip at 53, Sheridan at 59. We'll go with highs today in the upper 60s to low to mid 70s, so it's going to be cooler than yesterday as we have a cold front working its way through the area. We'll go with a high this afternoon of 75 here in the Magic City. We start off with some clouds and some sunshine, then we'll cloud up this afternoon ahead of that front, and that's when those isolated severe thunderstorms could come into play. In terms of what we're thinking, gusty winds in excess of 60 miles an hour, and we could see quarter-size hail. But the payoff is a really nice weekend on the way. But we're not done with 90-degree temperatures quite yet.
All right, another day of watching the sky. It did start to look a little spooky out there, but I'm like, I think it's going to miss our area.
Not my fault.
No, not your fault at all. Right. The weather does what it wants, when it wants. All right, Miller, thank you so much. I'll get to news. Our top story this morning, President Joe Biden is vowing to get revenge on the terrorist responsible for 2 deadly bombings near the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. 13 U.S. soldiers were killed along with 70 Afghans. Today, flights continued to leave from the airport as hundreds of Americans still need to be evacuated before an August 31st deadline. Yesterday was the deadliest day for the U.S. military in over a decade. President Biden ordered U.S. flags to fly at half-staff across the country. Both Montana senators released statements on the attack. Democrat John Tester sent his condolences to all those affected, saying, "Our brave servicemen and women represent the best of our nation, and they remain in my prayers." Republican Senator Steve Daines also sent his thoughts and prayers, but laid blame on the president, saying this tragedy was entirely preventable. The terrorist attacks in Kabul against U.S. troops, American citizens, and innocent Afghans are a devastating result of President Biden's disastrous withdrawal out of Afghanistan. Now in other news, the controversy over the COVID-19 vaccine remains strong, but the division has some perplexed. Q2's Andrea Lutz looks back at the polio virus and hears from a generation who never questioned the efficacy of a vaccine.
The polio vaccine was around for about 40 years. Then in 1979, polio was eliminated. Back then, those generations never even thought twice about getting a vaccine. So I asked them what they thought had changed.
You listened because you could see.
Claire Leslie remembers the polio epidemic quite well.
It went on for a long time. It was almost every summer. We would not be able to go to the swimming pool or the parks. We had to stay home.
The disease caused paralysis. Even Franklin Roosevelt got it.
When you saw the results of polio, you wanted to be vaccinated. Maybe that's why we listened to the doctor, because you didn't really know why your neighbor got it, but you didn't.
But she says the vaccine was different than COVID and that you could see the results.
COVID is much more prevalent than polio was. Polio struck very randomly. It didn't get the general population like COVID has.
She also says that's just what you did back then.
Those of us who kind of follow the doctor's orders would never, ever not vaccinate your children against smallpox, against whooping cough, against now, when my children grew up, they all had measles and mumps and chicken pox, and now people can be vaccinated against those.
The evolution of vaccines has rich ties to the state of Montana. Scientist Maurice Hilleman from Miles City has saved millions of lives after inventing dozens of vaccines for hepatitis, measles and mumps, and rubella.
It's been good work. It's really exciting to see the science and what can happen.
There he is, as a kid.
Sharon Peterson with the Montana Bioscience Alliance says his work should make Montanans proud of vaccines.
Maurice Hilleman is like the greatest scientist of the 21st century that no one knows about. People need to understand the science, and I'm hoping that knowing that somebody from Miles City, Montana was the person would really help understand the science.
She also remembers getting the polio vaccine.
And in the days when they did the polio vaccine, I remember taking my small children to Lewistown for the vaccine, and we never thought a thing about it. It was just, yeah, we can get vaccinated, we won't get polio, and that's really important. So.
She believes that if Maurice were alive today, he may have even helped develop the COVID-19 vaccine.
He totally believed in what he did and really never took credit for saving lives, and I think he would be a little shocked that people are resisting.
And while COVID is completely different, both women agree. They feel stumped at why there's so much controversy over vaccines.
Well, I try and be generous and say everybody has, people who haven't been vaccinated may have a reason. I don't understand the reason, but they may have a medical reason that I don't understand. I just can't be judgmental about everything, even though I want to be.
In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
It is important to point out the polio vaccine was not perfect. Back in 1955, a tainted polio vaccine paralyzed as many as 50 children and killed 5. That strain was infected with the live virus. In campus news, Montana State University is now requiring masks in all indoor areas where classes are taught. This will be in place until at least October 1st. The mandate comes 2 days after classes began and just a week after the university president announced mask wearing would be voluntary. School officials say they will honor full tuition and fees refunds until August 31st for any student wishing to withdraw due to the requirement. Yellowstone County public health officials are following a Montana law that prohibits discrimination against someone based on their vaccine status. Some county officials in Montana say the law has affected their ability to issue quarantine orders. That's because the CDC recommends quarantines for unvaccinated close contacts, but not for those who got their shots. But Yellowstone County has never ordered anyone to quarantine, even before the law took effect. Health Officer John Felton says they've taken a different approach.
We identify close contacts. We provide them information with what CDC says they should do. And much as the governor has said over and over, we expect people to make a personally responsible decision. We don't order them into quarantine. We don't track them in quarantine. We give people the information, tell them what the best science is, and expect them to use their personal responsibility to make a decision as to how they're going to manage their quarantine recommendation.
Felton says the law also applies to other vaccines, including hepatitis, measles, mumps, and rubella. At least 8 states across the country have more COVID-19 patients in their hospitals than at any other time since the pandemic began. CBS's Bradley Blackburn has more, including the latest on a court ruling that brings an end to the COVID-era eviction moratorium.
In a 6-3 decision yesterday, the Supreme Court blocked the Biden administration from enforcing a temporary ban on evictions that was put in place because of the coronavirus pandemic. It ends protections for millions of Americans who have not been able to pay the rent. The court said in an unsigned opinion, the CDC has exceeded its authority to issue a nationwide moratorium on evictions and insisted if a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must specifically authorize it. This as the COVID spread is worse than ever in many parts of the U.S., like here in Pascagoula, Mississippi, where the local hospital is running out of ICU beds.
I had a patient tell me one day that he said, I know I'm going to die. I literally walked out of the room and just put my back to the wall and cried, because what else do you do?
It's the same at this facility in Oregon. Across the state, ICUs are at 93% capacity, and COVID hospitalizations are at their highest levels since the start of the pandemic.
We are used to winning. Us ICU nurses, we're used to winning, and we're not winning. We're losing.
It's why there is a push to get more Americans vaccinated. In Illinois, the governor now ordering vaccines for all teachers, higher education students, and healthcare workers.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Illinois will also start requiring all residents, regardless of vaccination status, to wear masks indoors. Bradley Blackburn, CBS News.
Travel bookings, which had ticked up recently, are sinking again. The TSA reported the lowest number of passengers of the summer on Tuesday and Wednesday, down from a peak at the beginning of the month. A model from the University of Washington is projecting 98,000 American deaths from COVID-19 by December 1st. Daily deaths are averaging about 1,100, and the model predicts daily deaths to rise to 1,400 by the middle of September. However, it appears Americans are taking the threat of the Delta variant seriously. The number of daily vaccinations administered is about 900,000, which is up 80% in the last month. Many local leaders in Montana have been waiting to find out if they'll receive federal money for certain infrastructure projects. The state panel spent months considering hundreds of grants, and as MTN's Jonathan Ambarian tells us, decisions have been made.
A state commission has endorsed dozens of water and sewer projects across Montana, recommending them to receive a share of hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal American Rescue Plan Act. On Thursday, the Infrastructure Advisory Committee voted to recommend $125 million in competitive grants for these projects, and to limit each of those grants to $2 million. That would provide at least partial funding for more than 70 projects. However, Governor Greg Gianforte will have the final say on whether to adopt those recommendations. Montana lawmakers identified water and sewer projects as one of the main priorities they wanted to use ARPA money on. Cities, counties, and other local agencies submitted hundreds of requests for some of that funding, seeking about $900 million in total. That's far more than was available.
And the fact that over 300 applications come in very short order, and the vast majority of those are eligible for funding, I think tells us a huge story about the state of our infrastructure in Montana.
Montana DNRC ranked the competitive grant applications, with the biggest factor being projects' impact to health and safety. The top-ranked request was for the drinking water system at Montana City School. Other high priorities included wastewater systems in Darby, Rocker, Phillipsburg, and Sun Prairie, and water projects in Warden and Wilsall. The commission heard from many of the local governments that asked for grants, as they debated whether to give full funding to fewer projects or cap the maximum grant and fund more projects.
For us, with our project, partial funding means an uncompleted project, and we will have to go out and seek the remainder of the funding wherever we can.
I think to be fair and equitable through the whole state, that awarding strictly on the amount of the raking and the amount that they have would do a disservice to our whole state as a whole.
Governor Gianforte's office says he'll carefully consider the commission's recommendations, and there's no specific timeline yet for him to make a final decision. In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
Also making headlines this morning, there's new evidence of corrosion in the Florida condo that collapsed in June. Federal investigators released new video showing extensive corrosion and packed steel reinforcement along the foundation at certain parts of the building. Soon, a 5-part investigation will begin to determine exactly what happened. But one structural engineer says that amount of corrosion should have been noticed, documented, and fixed. 98 people died in the collapse. 7 Capitol Police officers just filed a lawsuit accusing former President Donald Trump of provoking the riots of January 6th. The lawsuit also names members of far-right extremist groups and Trump allies. It accuses them of committing acts of domestic terrorism in an unlawful effort to stay in power. A spokesperson for the former president did not comment on the officers' lawsuit. Trump previously stated he would defend executive privilege. The U.S. economy grew faster than expected last quarter. The Commerce Department released a new report showing more than 6% growth. It credited consumers with helping the economy bounce back after the pandemic recession. However, there are new concerns of the economy slowing back down as the Delta variant spreads through the country. The Department of Education is canceling student debt for 115,000 people who attended ITT Technical Institute. It comes out to $1.1 billion. The for-profit school closed in 2016 and is accused of luring students into taking out unaffordable private loans. The affected borrowers attended ITT Tech between 2008 and 2016 and did not get their degrees. A popular Billings coffee shop, Harper in Madison, is closing its doors. The owner, Joni Swartz, says she's moving closer to family. Harper in Madison was open for more than a decade. Swartz says owning her own shop has become a dream.
It was an experiment to see if you could build a business that was based on love rather than money. Even though I needed to fund college, it's like, I think this can work if the focus is not on money. And this seemed to be the perfect place for that. And I can tell you, it's worked. It works.
If you're one of many Harper and Madison fans, there's still time to say goodbye and have another cup of coffee, but you better hurry. Tomorrow is the last day it will be open. Thank you so much for starting your day with us here on Montana This Morning.